Hello and welcome back to the panel for our Premier League predictions, episode 5. My name's Matthew Chris from Gambling.com, and as ever, I'm joined by Celtic and Manchester United legend Brian McClair. And Brian, let me take you back in history. Let's go back to 1969. But the man has just stepped on the moon for the first time. America are just about to elect a new president in Richard Nixon, and Nottingham Forest had just beaten Liverpool at Anfield. 55 years later, man's back in space, courtesy of SpaceX for the first private spacewalk. America's about to elect a new president again. And, Nottingham Forest have just won away at Anfield again. So you mentioned it last week in your predictions. Why didn't you choose Forest?
I think for the reasons that I said, that I just could not see any way that Forest could win there. And if you look at the game and read the reports of the game, Liverpool squandered or spurned several chances, and Forest took one of the few chances they had. A very good goal from Hudson-Odoi and managed to their tactics got them through the rest of the game, and they have come away with and they're one of the number of teams that have got an unbeaten record in the Premier League. Alas, not Liverpool now.
Okay. Well, you did manage to get, I think, 7 predictions correct. Not any correct scores, but 7 outcomes nonetheless. So let's see if you can better that this week. So week 5 of the Premier League, and it starts on Saturday at 12:30 with West Ham hosting Chelsea.
Well, the two teams are struggling for form. Although Chelsea have got several more points than West Ham. West Ham managed to get a draw away at Fulham with a goal in Danny Ings goal in the 95th minute. And Chelsea won 1-0 at Bournemouth with a late goal as well, and Kunku score in the 86th minute. Chelsea's wins in the Premier League have been both away from home. West Ham have not been managed to win at home. And I reckon that run is going to continue. So I've chosen West Ham 1, Chelsea 2.
Okay. 2-1 Chelsea in the early London derby. On to the 3 o'clock games, and it's Aston Villa against Wolves in, well, a Midlands derby, I suppose you could call it.
Yes, indeed, in the Black Country derby. Aston Villa come from 2 goals down last week against Everton to win 3-2. And as I said, I thought that Watkins would break his duck, and he did with scoring 2 goals. I thought Wolves played very well against Newcastle. However, they didn't get any points. With regards to that, you got to fancy Villa at home. And even although they went down early to Everton last week, and I think Villa win this derby by 2-0.
Okay, 2-0 Villa. And next one, it's Fulham at home to Newcastle.
Well, Newcastle did the double over Fulham last year, and indeed the season before. It was a very good comeback win for Newcastle at Molineux, scoring a wonderful goal in that game also. I think that on merit, Fulham should have several more points than they do have. I think the performances have been very good. With that in mind, I'm tipping Fulham to beat Newcastle, which may be a bit against the odds, but I'm going for Fulham 2, Newcastle 1.
Interesting. Okay. Next up, it's a fixture that Evertonians might not fancy, like most of the fixtures so far this season. It's Leicester away, so Leicester home to Everton.
Well, I'm wondering if I'm wondering if Everton I'm going to be able to predict the wrong result every time I choose whatever team if it's Everton or their opponents, which has happened so far. With that in mind, Leicester were 2-0 up away at Palace and ended up drawing in injury time, so I'm sure we're very disappointed in that. Everton are in good goal scoring form, but they've lost 6 goals in that process against the 4 goals that they've scored, and ended up still with no points. But I'm going to go for an Everton win two
Oh,
one.
you're cursing again. You're going to have Evertonians banging on your door once again. But I mean,
No, it can't be from Wales if you think.
yeah, well, if you
I'm
think you're
tipping
going to
them
get
to
it
win,
wrong, yeah.
So,
But
but I just as you'd think that after two games of relinquishing a two-goal lead in both games, one at home, one away, that they would learn something from that. So that's what I'm hanging my prediction on.
I mean,
If
from
everybody continue to improve, I don't think they're as bad as the situation might suggest with where they are in the league table.
I guess it's one of those things, and you probably never really experienced this in your career because you were pretty successful, but it must be one of those things that you're just looking out for that first little bit of success to then build upon. And if that win does come, then one might bring two, might bring three, that kind of thing.
It's a big challenge for Sean Dyche to lift his players for every game, because I think now they're in a situation when you look at the last two games in particular, where almost there in the home game, and they're well in control for the vast parts of the game at Villa Park, and ended up coming away with nothing. So I think that'll be the biggest challenge for them this weekend, is to reinvigorate, encourage his players, and help to get them to believe that they can win at Leicester at the weekend.
Okay. Moving on from Everton, it's Liverpool now. Another 3 o'clock Saturday game, and this time they're at home to Bournemouth.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, there's only the most die-hard Forest fans would have predicted or bet on a win at Liverpool after 55 years, I think you said it was. Bournemouth, I think, were disappointed not to get the 3 points against Chelsea. Played very well, dominated a lot of the game, created more chances. I mean, Liverpool had 14 shots on target against Forest last week. How those players with that ability didn't manage to score is beyond me. I can't see Liverpool going consecutive games at home without scoring. So I'm going to go for Liverpool 3, Bournemouth 0.
Okay, Liverpool back with a bang then. Southampton, Ipswich.
Well, two teams that have very few points. Well, no points with regards to Southampton. They have now got an unenviable record. Southampton, they've been the first team to lose the first 4 games in 3 separate Premier League campaigns. I think that had they scored the penalty in the first half against Manchester United last week, it could have been very much a different story. But I think the second half tells you how the game went, where they had no attempts at all on United's goal. Contrary to that, Ipswich had no attempts at goal in the first half. And the last visit to the South Coast against Brighton, and managed to grind out an away point in a game that was not the prettiest and difficult one really to predict, because of the way that the teams are being. Ipswich have got upper points, Southampton have got none, but I'm going to go for a change of fortune for Southampton and a 2-1 win at home against Ipswich.
Okay, 2-1 Southampton. And that brings us on to our second London derby of the weekend, and it's Tottenham hosting Brentford. And believe it or not, Ange Postecoglou is under a little bit of pressure going into this one.
Yeah, I mean, you said on the start they had last year's. This season, last 2 games, losing by a goal. I think that he'll be lamenting his players' poor decisions and poor finishing versus Arsenal. I think they created most of the best chances in the match, and then they end up losing a really sucker punch from a set piece. You wouldn't expect it. I don't think he was the only player that was unmarked in the box for that particular corner. Great header. I suppose a kind of fitting way to win a derby game. Brentford scored the fastest goal this season last week at the Etihad after 43 seconds, but ended up losing the game by 2 goals from Haaland once again. Their top goal scorer, Visa, got injured in that game. He's going to be out for a couple of months. He's scored 3 goals already this campaign. There's a history of plenty of goals in this fixture. I did say that about the North London derby last week, and I was completely wrong about that.
You were.
I'm going to go, but yeah, 1-0 is not the lost goals, is it? So, all right, Spurs to win this time after Anne's given them a good talking to about the chances that they've missed. Look out for Son at the weekend. Spurs 3, Brentford 1.
3-1. Okay, so let's move on to the 5:30 game. Now, Eric Ten Hag bought himself a little bit of time, having beaten lowly Southampton last week, a game you called and predicted correctly. They travel away again to lowly opponents, this time Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, I think that they got the fortune last week in the game against Southampton. Palace beat United home and away last season, scoring 5 goals and conceded no goals. The game at Selhurst Park was probably Man United's worst performance of the campaign last season. They dominated the second half against after being 2-0 up at half-time against Southampton. Palace have not won a game, so I don't think you can look into anything with regards to both games last season. And I'm going to predict an away win again. I can't see how Palace are going to get anything out of this at all. So Palace 0, United 2.
Handy away win that would be again for United, and who knows, they win that one and suddenly be a case of crisis. What crisis?
Well, yeah, that's how football is, isn't it? You know, it's, 2 away wins, irrespective of where they are, how they are. So at the moment, it's the points that are the most important thing. And of course, it must be buoyed by the fact that they kept a clean sheet.
Yeah. Sunday, first game is the 2:00 game, and that's Brighton against Nottingham Forest. How do you see this one?
Well, coming into game 5, I don't think many people would have predicted that both Brighton and Forest would be unbeaten in the Premier League this season. That would be me included, of course, because they couldn't see them getting anything at Anfield. Brighton were involved in a really scrappy game against Ipswich. As I mentioned earlier, Forest dug deep to win at Anfield. It could be another draw, but I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for the home team.
1-0 Brighton, and that brings us on to the main game at the weekend. I suppose nobody would dispute that, and it's Manchester City hosting their nearest title rivals, as it stands, Arsenal. What do you see here?
Well, yeah, the biggest Premier League game of the weekend, if not the season so far, first v second. It was always going to come down to really either an Arsenal or City to win the title last year. I suppose the big question is, can anybody stop Haaland, who has now scored 72 Premier League goals in 70 Premier League games? Perhaps a man of the match, Gabriel, and his partner Saliba can. Everything really points to a win for City, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Sitting on the fence, I like that. But I guess both teams would probably take that as the season starts. Arsenal probably...
I think in Arsenal's situation, yeah, particularly, I think if all of Arsenal players were fit, I think they would be more confident of getting 3 points at City. But as we mentioned last week, City's home record is pretty dominant and very good, and they are scoring a lot of goals both at home and away. I think the big thing, as I said, is can they keep Haaland away from the goals?
Oh, we shall see. And that brings us to the end of this week's Premier League predictions with the panel. Don't forget, if you agree or disagree with 4 times Premier League winner Brian McClair, you can comment in the comment section below. We'll see how Brian gets on, and we'll be back next week with our Premier League predictions. See you then.